give us some of the other examples that you've thought of are kind of prepared for us, and run through how that played out and the wisdom that you got from it.
In terms of failure or
Yeah,
success?
in terms of failure.
Failure. Well, a lot of failure has to deal with exactly how you define it. So I think early on, I struggled with what is success and how do I define that success. So I think over the last couple of years, basically working through different business strategies, understanding how to generate recurring revenue within a software business. How to sell that. We failed a lot early on in terms of how do we, a specific example is learning how to use Google AdWords, and learning how to target. I've wasted a couple $100, maybe a couple $1,000s, just playing with Google AdWords and learning how to define your marketing on your website, define your product. Write the right Google AdWords. And one of the things that we do on a weekly basis and beginning to do within Provider Trust is we write 3 to 4 Google AdWords articles or advertisements. And then every week we take the top or the lowest performing one and we rewrite it to try to beat the highest performing one. So within that failure, we've defined what success is, which is the top 2 or 3. We're constantly writing a new ad to try to beat the top ad. So we take the bottom one, cut it out, and then rewrite it, so that we're constantly iterating on that idea of what success and failure is.
Do you have any more stories for us?
Yeah, one of them is just like personal, from a standpoint of some businesses, that have gone well and gone bad. We had one particular one, a neuroimaging company that I was involved in, and learning how to invest. I was an investor in it and initially helped raise some funds for it, and then stepped out to run Blue Sky full time, and then basically got. So I got pulled away from the operational team and really didn't have the time to really put into it. And as a result, we lost some money in that investment, and it definitely was not fun. It's not fun to make phone calls or talk to individuals and say, listen, you invested this idea. But the thing that I learned out of that is really 2 things: is you could do everything, but you can't do it all at the same time. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with the idea of the ADD idea. Oh, I got this idea, let's try. Well, that's great, but you need to try one idea at a time. So then what I say is fail early and often, so you could wipe that idea out or iterate upon that idea. But I've really learned to focus my ideas. When I started off early, I had tons and tons of ideas, and I tried a couple, got involved with a couple, had some failures, but then have had some successes within the healthcare technology. So I've kind of defined where I want to be within that space, and then begin to invest in that space. With that, the other thing is make sure that and trust the people that you're working with, because you could have the best job in the world, but if you're not enjoying the people you're working with, and it goes both ways. I mean, you have to really build into that relationship, and they have to build into that relationship as well. But so defining that success, and then failing early and often, and then making sure that you're working with people that you really can work with. And I think I've found that with my current company, with Provider Trust. I've got a great business partner in Michael Rosen, and beginning to build the team to hopefully build a very valuable company.
Awesome. So it sounds like with that last example with the imaging company, that it almost wasn't a huge deal for you, like when you're recapping it now.
No, it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
It was probably, one of the biggest learning lessons that I've ever learned. I mean, never sign a document unless you read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Those people who have signed documents and you're like, what in the world? I did not sign this. And no, your signature is there. So, I trusted, the group of people that I worked with. And I was young. I was 24 when I came in and started doing that stuff. And, that was 4 or 5 years later that, I realized my mistake. So, you really have to pay attention to what you're doing. I'm still a big believer in lean startups, so I don't like to spend a ton of money on lawyer fees, but it is important that you have people around you who could really help you think through those early stage ventures, because it put a lot of stress on myself, on my marriage. With Leanne and going through residency, we both have pretty high stressful jobs, and so there were days when my stomach was hurting and I couldn't sleep. So hopefully I learned a lot of lessons.
What was it that in the imaging company? What was it that you would really accredit the failure of that to?
Well, we had an imaging company down in Florida, Melbourne, Florida, and a lot of it just comes down to relationships. And I think when we weren't down there on a daily basis and we really stepped out of the day-to-day operations, we couldn't manage those relationships and continue to nurture those relationships in terms of referrals, in terms of growth, in terms of ideas. And so we weren't able to just really manage those relationships. So you have the relationships, you also have the economy. So we were, starting a company in probably the worst economic state in the country because of NASA. So it was in Melbourne, Florida, which is right next to NASA, which, NASA's budget and their capacity, they're really contracting in terms of what they're spending on the space program. So that economy, along with the housing crisis, along with a number of other things occurred down in that area. So there was just not very much money. It was an innovative idea. So it was kind of on the fringes from a medical standpoint. Did some really neat stuff. We correlated blood flow patterns to specific disorders. So we were able to identify schizophrenia and post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that, very early on in the process to help get people treatment, and saw a lot of success from a clinical standpoint, but we needed more money and more capital to be able to really scale it. So I would say, one, managing those relationships, two, the economic structure, and then when it all comes down to it, you run out of capital and, you can't pay and people to do what needs to be done.